So it's always good to check in on the education system and see if they're sufficiently embarrassed enough to reform yet. I regret to inform you, no, they're currently letting CCP agents and fetish experts infiltrate primary schools and universities. So let's go through a roundup of the most embarrassing things about the UK education system. First of all, universities. So apparently, according to the University of Surrey, criticising the CCP's lockdown policy will trigger Chinese students, so academics have been told not to do so.
Oh no, not those Chinese students that don't actually do any work. Oh, how terrible. They're just a means of bankrolling money, and then they get a rubber stamp printed on their qualification by the institution.
It's almost like you've presaged the reason as to why they don't want to criticise these students. We'll get onto that shortly.
Sorry for spoiling you.
No, that's fine. I'm happy to. So it's a mandatory module for staff, and it's titled The Introduction to Race Equity, and it includes several examples of microaggressions. And one of those are Chinese students may simply feel they're caring more about others when they're raising the zero COVID policy, so you cannot critique it because it will upset them. It quotes a Chinese student saying to their flatmates that they don't understand how its government is handling COVID. Our community's way of doing this is really different from other countries, a very, very strict lockdown. But you're pretty focused on keeping yourself safe and also keeping other people safe. Care more about others by staying at home for at least 2 weeks. If you look at the most serious cases like Wuhan and the nearby areas, they controlled the virus pretty quickly. But we talked about this to our flatmates. They just don't understand this. Yeah, maybe they saw the videos of the government welding people in their homes and people that died of starvation face down in their kitchen dinner tables. And maybe the fact that the Chinese government saying it had zero COVID cases, while every other country in the world was recording them, where it was the epicenter of the COVID outbreak, most people think they were lying. Maybe it was that.
They were lying. And also, the guy who actually was sent in to do the Wuhan lab leak investigation, it turned out that he was some sort of sex offender. And the theory on the street is, I wouldn't allege this myself because I'm very averse to being sued. But some people are saying that maybe the Chinese state had dirt on the guy and maybe they used it to blackmail him to get the result that they wanted. I mean, I would never say that. That's other people's words because, I'm respectful of this pervert's right to privacy.
We can absolutely say that the Chinese government have murdered people. So I'm just absolutely delighted to criticise those people. But obviously UK universities aren't too keen. 13 academics have actually complained about this because they said that you are policing conformity with controversial moral and or political beliefs. And a University of Surrey spokesman said, "We don't recognise this characterisation of our new academic appraisal process, which explicitly embeds protection of academic freedom in its guidelines and places at its heart support for professional development of its academics." You don't recognise the characterisation, but they just printed the quote you put in the transcript. So you did it. But you did this. Okay, whatever. The reason they did this is, of course, as you've already presaged, Chinese student applications are up by 12% from 25,810 in 2021 to 28,930 in 2022. China is now the second largest market of international students compared to the entire EU coming to Britain. And of course, international students pay more fees. They often pay their accommodation up front because they're not able to do rent plans because they can't provide proof of address and things like that for UK residency. So these are really rich, often Communist Party bankroll Chinese students who are paying the universities and the accommodation providers partnered with them lots and lots of money. So they're addicted to foreign money.
Yeah, and there's also the fact that they're kind of like the ideal students for the university machine in that they don't really have high expectations of their lecturers. They don't go to university and actually want to be intellectually challenged a lot of the time because they'll sit there quietly writing notes and they're just there to get the qualification, right?
Yeah.
They don't actually care about the quality of the education in the same way that many British and other international students would approach it.
And they also don't assimilate into the student body and create their own small enclaves where they only speak Chinese, they only gamble, and so you have a parallel social system on campus.
So I remember actually talking to a Chinese student when I was a bit more naive, and I presumed that, well, you're in the West because you want to, and they were studying politics, so I presumed, oh, you're studying Western politics because you want to know about things like, freedom and democracy, right? And I asked them about it, and they're like, oh, I don't know anything about those things. And they basically changed the topic. And I was just like, oh, right, this is a bit strange. So you're in the West covering politics, but, the main difference between the West and China, you're not interested in that. No, don't know anything about it.
I'm going to get myself in trouble telling this story, but okay. A friend of mine asked another friend of mine's girlfriend, who is Chinese, a question, and so they went and got some bubble tea in London, and he just asked the earnest question, "Oh, bubble tea, is it like Taiwan or Hong Kong, or is it mainland China?" And the girl went, "Oh, it's China." And he went, "Yeah, but like as in like was it?" And she just turned around and went to him, "It's China," and he just didn't clock. It's just one of those scenarios of where, oh, you're not here to have a discussion. You're here as a fully bought-in ideologue. That's worrying. All right, then. So we just flood our country with those guys and make ourselves reliant on those. No problem at all.
So it comes from Taiwan, then?
I think so.
If that response happened, it must.
I would imagine so. Bubble tea aficionados, correct us in the comments.
I don't even know what it is. It sounds like a fancy London thing to me.
It's little tapioca balls in like cold tea.
Why do you want solids in a tea? It's basically a soup, then.
Yeah, they eat them. Don't ask me. I don't eat it. It's weird food. All right. Anyway, on to the next one. Next most embarrassing university is Oxford, because obviously that's an institution which has absolutely no credibility. I've taught there before. Lovely place. Shame about the staff. So Kathleen Stock went to give a talk there recently. Kathleen Stock was, of course, the feminist academic who wrote Material Girls, who was kicked out of the University of Sussex because she went, "Women don't have a penis," which seems to be an observable fact. I think she's a lesbian as well, so she might just be the expert. And 5 colleges decided to hand out therapy sessions and like safety rooms to students that complained about it.
I mean, I'm not sure if she's a lecturer in biology, but not exactly a revelation, is it?
No, not exactly shocking. There was also a story that I didn't include here, but because we'll be talking to Stephen at some point. But Stephen J. Shaw is a documentary filmmaker who spoke about demographics. Most of his documentary isn't even out yet. It hasn't been screened properly. It's just the first 40 minutes or so, and he was invited by a friend of mine to speak at Cambridge and screen the film, and about 90 Cambridge students decided to stage a protest, book out the tickets to try and disrupt the event. And so Cambridge said, okay, you've got to hire private security and you've got to ensure that the protest, which will be happening on a public street, does not get too unruly. And when she did that and expensed it, they then said, but it's too close to the exam season and exam hall, so it might cause disruption. So they made her hire a private venue off campus while Stephen was flying over from Tokyo and had already paid for the trip. Yeah.
It's not very good, is it?
No.
And the obvious thing to do here, and this isn't very libertarian of me, but kick the students out.
Yep.
If they're causing a fuss about free discussion, kick them out.
You're clearly
take their money and boot them on the street where they belong.
You're not abiding by the rules of an academic institution. It's not a creche. It's not a daycare. Mm-hmm. You're meant to be there to learn and have your ideas challenged. You children.
I mean, if for some reason like a communist dictator came to the university campus, rather than me protesting it and cancelling it, I'll probably be quite interested in seeing what they had to say. Well, I don't agree with them. I think they're abhorrent. I think they're probably in some way, this hypothetical person's probably a murderer in some way. But, still value in hearing what they have to say.
My student society invited Carl to the campus, and we had an Antifa group try and start fights, involve the student union. And then we also we were the first university society to have an Israeli and a Palestinian ambassador sit down and have a conversation on the university campus. Of course, BDS showed up and tried to shut the event down. We didn't have anyone. Boycott, divest, and sanction.
Oh, right.
The anti-Israeli lobby who want them to divest away from having any funding or whatever, which arguments on both sides, cool, don't care. But don't shut down the movement, come in and actually ask some questions. So I'm happy to show up to contentious speakers that I don't agree with. I argued with the head of BPAS, the leading abortion provider, when she came in. I'm not so sensitive as to look people in the eyes that I think are morally reprehensible and challenge them on it. But this woman says, well, as a lesbian, not a fan of men in dresses. And suddenly there's a meltdown. It's just pathetic. It's a joke. One of the most prestigious institutions known worldwide, and you've resorted to this, really? All right. If you want to look at a respectable academic, you can go over to our website and watch this free interview I did with Professor Abigail Favale, who wrote the book The Genesis of Gender. And we spoke about some really insightful topics like sexual complementarianism. And we actually discussed Simone de Beauvoir for a bit, because I've had a particular bugbear with Simone de Beauvoir for quite a while, and Carl and I did a very good podcast on her, and Abigail and I had the same conclusions on de Beauvoir, which is she's weirdly trying to turn all women into men and depopulate the entire human race, and she's like a giant dragon of chaos. Interesting thing is, an Irish university seems to have agreed with me. Simone de Beauvoir was going to get a statue, and then they dropped it because of reputational concerns. So this is actually a positive story. The French writer and philosopher Simone de Beauvoir was dropped from a list of female candidates to have their sculptures placed in the old library at Trinity College Dublin because of alleged grooming of sexual partners for herself and longtime friend Jean-Paul Sartre, who has an impressive amount of vision, I will put it that way. You can look at both sides of the room at the same time.
Talking of vision, I wish I didn't have it now I've seen that picture of her. I can see why she wanted to turn women into men, because she's already there by the looks of it.
Yeah, it's an absolute crone. Oh no. Anyway, de Beauvoir was on a shortlist of 8 or 9, according to the source, when people involved were told that books had been published in which it was alleged that the writer and philosopher had sex with young students whom she shared as lovers with Sartre. According to the book A Dangerous Liaison, written by Carol Seymour Jones, Beauvoir was subject of an official complaint in 1943 when the mother of a pupil alleged the writer had corrupted her daughter and acted as a procurer for Sartre. The complaint was not upheld, but Beauvoir lost her teaching job. On Wednesday, the university announced it was denaming the former Berkeley Library because of the association with the 18th century philosopher Bishop George Berkeley with slave ownership. Typical. And last year, the Schrödinger Theatre in TCD, named after the famous Austrian physicist Erwin Schrödinger, was renamed the Physics Theatre. The change came a year after a report in the Irish Times that said that Schrödinger, who became an Irish citizen in 1948, was a serial abuser whose behaviour fitted the profile of a paedophile in the widely understood sense of the term. So at least they're being consistent. Fair enough. I'm happy to dename everything that's named after a bunch of nonces. I'm sure that the BBC will address all of their ties to Jimmy Savile imminently.
I wonder if his defence is, I could be a paedophile, I could not be, but if I'm observed, it changes the result. I don't know.
That was terribly dark.
I know,
but it
I'm
was
sorry.
quite funny. Also, I don't know why anyone's shocked about Beauvoir. She literally wrote like Catholic schoolgirl erotica when she was younger.
It's always the Catholics, man.
Yeah, and she's
sorry.
not true. And she also signed that giant letter of all the French academics that said the age of consent should be lowered to the point of abolition. So we always knew she was a nonce, but at least she's not getting a statue, so that's something. So are universities worth the money? That's a good question. Well, apparently the Labour Party don't think so, because Keir Starmer, in trying to reposition to look like the sensible centrist, has dropped his free tuition pledge. If we go over to the next one, he says that he's likely to move on from that commitment. He also paid down suggestions he would increase income tax on top earners and raise the level of capital gains tax because, of course, the Conservatives are doing that and it's making them look bad.
He's trying to outflank the Conservatives on the right by the looks of it.
Yeah, which is a Blairite tactic. But
it is, yeah.
Obviously, most of the time, as we said with the media segment just before, when the two parties are fighting, it's mainly over optics and the speed of the rate of change because they've already agreed on the destination. They're just working out how to sell it to us plebs. And so he's actively happy for the universities to be teaching this really subversive stuff. And he's actually happy to have lots of people go to the institutions because it keeps them being the managerial technocrats that Tony Blair wanted them to be, to sign onto the agenda. It's just, again, the rate of change. How many people can we conscript at one time to make it look fiscally responsible? And so don't think that Keir Starmer's on your side. It's just that they're not. The problem's not going to get as bad as it currently could be. That's optimistic, I suppose. Well, what about schools? All right, they've remained ideologically captured. So Starmer's now saying that his incumbent Labour government is going to bring influencers and actresses into schools to teach boys to have respect for women. Define one. That would be a great start if you knew what it was.
I can't respect something I don't know exists.
I didn't respect them anyway. Starmer said, I do think that with the right way of approaching it, we could begin a discussion which would enable boys and young men to feel much more comfortable because of all the cultural change does require them to call out and understand misogyny. You're calling catcalling misogyny, and you're doing nothing about the porn industry. Like, excuse me if I don't think you're sincere here. Excuse me if I think it's just a tool for power.
Can children even be misogynistic? I don't think they really can. Can you imagine a child just saying to their mother, like, "Oi, make me a sandwich"? They'd be like, their mother would be like, "No, shut up."
Well, the mum probably does it anyway for packed lunch. Like,
yeah.
But the point being, I don't really know many men that actually hate women. Like, they resent the current state of dating, but most men like women a bit too much. That'd be probably a fair statement. So
most men have women as their family members. I mean,
most of my mothers are women. I mean,
I mean, the whole concept of misogyny is ridiculous anyway, because most men have a very strong preference for their family. So the women in their family are probably far more important to them than other men. In fact, other men that they're in direct competition with.
Well, lots of things that men do are to earn the affections of women. That's just how...
Pretty much everything men do, to a certain extent. it can at least relate in some way.
Yeah, but that doesn't matter to Labour. So instead, they're getting in Georgia Harrison, who I think she was a former Love Island contestant, who had her boyfriend post revenge porn of her online, which is obviously reprehensible. Totally understandable to be against that.
But going on Love Island is not a good example of
why you should respect women.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why I disrespect them, if anything.
And then Charlotte Big Jugs from the In-Betweeners, Emily Atack, is involved in this. I'm not joking. The woman who made her career from calling herself Charlotte Big Jugs. She wrote an article. This is linked at the bottom of this article. If you go back, please, John, it'll be down there at the bottom, just literally at the bottom of the... Go up. There we go. Emily Atack's article says that she feels that she is sexually assaulted 100 times a day because she gets sent unsolicited penis pictures on Instagram. Now, don't condone the blokes doing that. It's weird, creepy, and it's not going to get you anywhere, but use the sensitivity filter on Twitter. Don't reply to unsolicited DMs. Don't respond to people that don't follow you. Like, there are tools that you can use rather than terraforming the entire education system just to make yourself feel safer. Like, and also, it comes back to the debate I had on Piers Morgan quite a while ago, where Ava said that she likes that men want to be afraid. One, that's just a naked power grab by resentful feminists who want to bully and demoralize men into being emasculated so that they can dominate them. But also, if there are actual rapists, you can't teach them not to rape. Like, most of the time, they are just severely broken, often biologically inclined to be psychopaths. And all you can do is just have such severe punishments that it discourages them from ever doing it in the first place. It's a
complete misunderstanding of the nature of the problem there.
Yeah.
Because I don't think most sexual criminals don't understand that what they're doing is wrong. There might be their defense in court, but they're lying. I mean, they know what they're doing is wrong.
That's why they try to conceal it.
Yeah. I mean, like 99.99999% of society understands that it's wrong.
Yeah, the overwhelming majority of men want to shoot the rapists, not be one.
Mm-hmm.
But do you think that maybe the sex education curriculum might be a bit self-defeating on this point? Because if we go to this next piece from the Telegraph, one sex education provider taught kids about quick, rough, and anonymous sex. So, the School of Sexuality Education, which is an NGO that goes into about 300 primary and secondary schools, had a bunch of ambassadors listed on their website. One of them was a master fetish trainer. The chief executive said it was regrettable that their website had hyperlinks to resources about purchasing sex toys, bondage, and anal masturbation. Regrettable.
So not only did they provide information, they provided links to purchase them.
Yes.
So to children. Some sort of weird grift as well.
Yep.
It's like the most immoral thing I could...
If we go to the Telegraph article that's digital, we have even more incriminating stuff on these people. In another worksheet, please move on, St. John, it stated that virginity does not exist. Quote, the idea of virginity is made up by society. It is not fixed in any biological fact. This is according to the writer and activist Dr. Han Banks, and she asserted that virginity does not exist. The exercise that they were proposing in school invites pupils to discuss whether virginity is a damaging social construct. Okay, Gruber.
It's such a weird notion as well. Also, just like the existence of the so-called incel movement.
Yeah.
Like, it
how are you going to insult someone as an incel and also say virginity does not exist?
You pick one or the other.
I self-describe as a top shagger, I suppose. Also, not to get anatomical, but women have hymens. That's an actual anatomical thing. So that's biologically incorrect as well. It just, no, but doesn't matter. Do you want to know some of their other workshop facilitators?
Sure.
Almaz Oheen, who's a journalist who writes erotic fiction. Nadia Dean, a sex educator who is working on a line of sex toys set to revolutionize your toy drawer forever. And she used to manage mail orders for a sex shop in East London. Emma Chan, a doctor who blogs about sex toys and masturbation. Their personal websites, which were linked originally on the website and all contain links to porn, have been since removed. So they're scrubbing the evidence, but you can probably still get it on an archive. So anyone who's in the Miriam Cates camp and is doing the sex education inquiry that has already taken some of our evidence after we looked at Swindon Council stuff. Here's some more stuff for you. I'll be sending it to you in due course.
I don't understand, in these schools, who on earth is in charge of safeguarding there? Because, I mean...
Liberal white women.
Yeah.
That's it.
They have to lose their jobs here, because there's no way that you can let this slip. Either someone messed up and didn't pass it on to them, or...
Most of
Or
them,
they approved of it.
most of them approve of it under the guise of inclusion and the fact that they have mental health disorders. Like the borderline personality disorder rates among lots of women with trans children are very, very high. And also, the idea that they're going to face any accountability for this, considering the teachers' unions, is very, very low. If you think that's bad, we'll go over to the next one. There's a Glam and Drag camp paid by UK taxpayers. Children as young as 6 took part. Serious questions must be answered, MPs have said. Very stern there. The event took place in Doncaster over Easter, and it saw children spend 4 hours creating costumes, applying makeup, and creating alter egos for themselves. I think back to the drag pedagogy paper that said that you should embrace a replacement glitter family to disrupt the reproductive futurity of the nuclear family. These people are sick.
By the way, if a teacher describes himself as a pedagogue, they may well be in danger of being a pederast.
Yeah, not unsurprising there. The event was approved by the City Council and funded by the government's Holiday Activity and Food Programme, a £205 million initiative intended to provide, quote, enriching and engaging activities for those on free school meals. Because that seems relevant. Local MP, Nick Fletcher, who characterises the true moral strength of the Tory party here with his defence, who sits on the Education Select Committee, so he should be an expert in this. I don't see any reason why we should have glam and drag sessions through holiday activity funding. I don't see why the taxpayer should be paying for that. I don't see the relevance of it. There's lots of fun things for children to do. They've never done this before. I don't see why we need to start now. The government is spending an awful lot of money on this, but it's critical that it's spent in the right way, and I don't believe that this is. Is your only ability to critique this degeneracy from a material angle? Well, if a private company were to do it, that would be totally fine to flash yourself to kids, but you're not getting a return on investment for the taxpayer. Have some balls! Come on! Really? They're subjecting children to weird stuff, and you can just say, well, we've overspent a little bit here from the Levelling Up Fund. I'm sick of the absolute moral castration of the Conservative Party. There are a few good MPs. They're working on it, as I've just referenced Miriam Kate, but they're being sandbagged by people that are just fence sitters like this, and it's really annoying. The only bit of good news that I do have, if we go on to this next one, and this is probably from the work that Kate's has done, and Kemi Badenoch, to be fair, I'll give her some credit for this one, is that schools can now, single-sex schools, can now reject transgender pupils, which is a good thing. So you aren't getting a Loudoun County scenario where a boy that's identifying as non-binary and putting on a dress goes into multiple bathrooms and rapes young women, which is disgusting. They're now no longer forced to accommodate transgender pupils. Head teachers of girls' schools will be told they can reject pupils who are legally male but identify as female. The same rules will apply for boys' schools in reverse. School teachers will be told they can refuse to use different pronouns, and schools will be reassured they will be not breaching the Equality Act of 2010 if they do so, which should be repealed anyway. Thank you very much. So well done to the Tories are actually pushing back against it. Shame on the MPs that are doing absolutely nothing. Shame on the schools that are still bringing these perverts in, and the universities that are caving to the Chinese Communist Party. And I suppose we'll bring you any more updates if the situation gets any better.
If you appreciated that segment from the podcast The Lotus Eaters, you can go to lotuseaters.com to get access to all the premium content that's on the website, such as the Epoch series, this episode on the Assyrians Part 5, Two Men Go to a Museum. If you'd like to find out what else is being put out, you can follow on Getter at lotuseaters_com on Getter. Thank you and goodbye.